Hi class, in this recording we will be focusing on glandular secretions. When we think of a gland is anything, a cell or an organ, that secretes a substance. That substance can be used in the body or can be released from the body. Well, another term for being released from the body is elimination. As we look at our glands are typically going to have epithelial tissues surrounded by some connective tissues. And those connective tissues will form both a supportive framework and a protective capsule on the outside. It's also worth emphasizing that the connective tissues also are going to provide nutrient exchange. The connective tissues have lots of blood vessels, whereas the epithelial tissues themselves are avascular and without blood vessels. Glandular secretions and excretions can be similar. The distinction between a secretion and an excretion is that secretions are useful, where excretions we want to get rid of. So as we look at endocrine glands, this has an entire unit dedicated to it. Endo means in, and these endocrine glands do not have ducts and secrete hormones directly into the bloodstream. These hormones, which are released into the bloodstream, are chemical messengers that will be carried through the bloodstream to somewhere else in the body to stimulate some cells. It's worth emphasizing that because they are, when we look at this word endo means in, the secretions of an endocrine gland remain in the body. And here's a mild typo here, it's BIOLGANS. Some organs have both endocrine and exocrine functions. There's my G right there, oops. For example, the liver, the ovaries and testes, our pancreas, these are double duty organs that make secretions that leave the body and make secretions that stay in the body. Some examples of endocrine exclusive glands include the thyroid, adrenal, and pituitary glands. As we look at these exocrine glands, exocrine refers exo meaning out. Exocrine glands are going to make an excretion that leaves the body through a duct that gets to the surface epithelium through the duct. Now these surfaces, or these glands and surfaces, can be either external or internal. And when I say external, I'm referring to the surface of our skin, and classic examples include sweat glands and tear glands. We also can make internal secretions to the internal surfaces. The pancreas, the salivary glands, the goblet cells within the intestinal tract, all of their secretions go to the lining of the digestive tract and ultimately leave our bodies through elimination when we have a defecation event. As we look at unicellular glands, these unicellular glands can be either endo or exocrine in function. They're going to be found in an epithelium that is mostly non-secretory. And this epithelium that's mostly non-secretory will have just an occasional single cell or unicellular secretion. The most notable example is the goblet cells of the mucosa. So we have those mucus-secreting goblet cells that are going to make lots of unicellular secretions, and we also have some endocrine cells of the stomach that are going to release hormones within the bloodstream. As we look at exocrine glands, exo again meaning outside, exocrine glands are going to have a capsule on the outer edge of the gland that separates them from surrounding tissue types. This capsule is made of connective tissues and can form either septa or trabeculae. These septa or trabeculae of the capsule are going to extend into the gland and divide the interior of gland into compartments. These compartments are typically referred to as lobes or lobules. The tissue within the exocrine gland that makes our favorite excretion is referred to as the stroma. So stroma is a generic term that refers to the gland secreting tissue within an exocrine gland. And then we also are going to have parenchyma. And I'm sorry, I misspoke. When I said that the stroma is the tissue that makes the secretion, I meant to say that the stroma is the tissue that supports the secreting tissues. So the stroma supports the parenchyma to help the parenchyma be the best possible secreting cell it can. So as we look at our exocrine glands, there's three primary tissue types of all exocrine glands. We have the parenchyma that makes the secretions. The parenchyma is supported by the stroma, and the stroma is organized by the capsule. As we look at our exocrine glands, we can classify them based on the shape of the duct and the shape of the gland. If this duct is unbranched, we refer to it as a simple duct, and if it has branches, we refer to it as a compound duct. So here's a simple duct, here's a compound duct with branches. So we have two compounds on the middle and on the right, and then one simple over here on the left. We also can name the glands based on their shape. If they're tubular, the secretory portion is narrow. If they're acinar, the secretory portion forms a bulge or a sac, sometimes referred to as a sinus or an alveolus. And if they are a tubular acinar, the secretory cells are on both the tubular and the acinar portions. So in red, over here, I'm drawing a red arrow next to the secretory portion of this tissue. That is a gland that has a long tube. So we would call this a tubular gland for the secretory name. And because there's no branching, we would use the phrase simple. So this is a simple coiled tubular gland. Over here, there's multiple branches to the ducts. So we are going to use the phrase compound. And the secretory cells are exclusively located within bulges. So we refer to this as a compound acinar gland. And then over here on the on the right side of the screen, we have multiple branches, so we use the term compound. And the secretory cells are both in the bulges and in the narrow portions, so we say tubuloacinar. So the full name would be compound tubuloacinar. As we look at the secretions that are made by these glands, serous glands in particular produce very watery secretions, so very thin secretions. Examples of serous glands include sweat glands, mammary glands, our tears and digestive juices are also serous excretions. When we look at a mucus gland, the mucus glands are going to produce mucin, and mucin is a glycoprotein that will bind to water, and water plus mucin will give us mucus. The cell type associated with secreting mucin is a goblet cell, and it's the most popular kind, or the most common kind, of mucus gland. We're also going to have some mixed glands. These mixed glands are going to have a combination of both serous and mucus cell types. So instead of producing watery secretions only, or thick mucus secretions only, they produce a mixture of the two types of secretions. And depending on the intracellular environment, the environment inside of our bodies, sometimes the viscosity of that secretion can vary from more serous to more viscous in nature. There are also different ways that we can make secretions. As we look at the method of secretion, the first one we're going to focus on is an apocrine secretion. And an apocrine secretion is going to be a method of secretion where we take our favorite compound, and that chemical compound will then be exocytized from the cell as a completely encapsulated vesicle. So that we're going to have, when we think of apocrine secretion, I want you to think of budding from the cell surface. So as we look at this budding, it's worth emphasizing that the cell loses phospholipids every time it makes an apocrine secretion because the cell loses some of its plasma membrane. Apocrine is a term that's also used to describe a kind of axillary anogenital sweat gland, and that particular gland is an exception because it's now known to use the merocrine method of secretion, even though it was initially thought to use an apocrine method of secretion. So when you think of apocrine, think budding. A-B, apocrine budding. The next method of secretion is merocrine, and this merocrine method of secretion is our traditional method of exocytosis, where we excrete the chemical into the extracellular environment, but we do not lose phospholipids or parts of the cell membrane in this process. Examples of merocrine secretion include both tear glands, pancreas, gastric glands, and a wide variety of other glandular types within our bodies. We also have holocrine secretion. Holocrine secretion is a form of secretion where the cells are going to disintegrate via apoptosis. So when we think of holocrine secretion, this is a method that's going to have all of the chemical compounds of the cell being excreted to the surface. So this is a method of secretion that has all those cell fragments being released. So we're going to have all of the lipids of the cell membrane, all of the proteins of the cytoplasm, absolutely everything is mixed together, mashed together, and released. So when we think of the sebaceous or oil glands of our integumentary system and the glands of our eyelids, we're going to have a wide variety of chemical compounds, macromolecules being secreted in these complex mixtures that are released. That's all we have for this recording. If you have any questions or comments about glandular secretions associated with the epithelial tissues, please don't hesitate to to post them on the class discussion board or to shoot me an email. And as always, happy studies.